Tonight, a peaceful protest takes over the streets of Toronto, marching against racial injustice.
No peace! No peace!
More demonstrations are expected this weekend. Plus,
now, these business owners are advised to begin preparing for reopening.
the city puts restaurants and barbers on notice to get ready as the premier promises details on what stage 2 of reopening will look like. And
every day I fear for my mom.
the province's moratorium on evictions is meant to protect tenants, but some landlords say it's putting their safety at risk. Good evening, I'm Mike Wise. Hundreds of people held a peaceful march through downtown Toronto this afternoon in an anti-racism demonstration. It was in solidarity with similar protests in the United States and in order, they say, to draw attention to anti-black racism in Canada. Our Chris Glover was there.
Businesses braced for the worst. But it never came. Thousands descended on Toronto, but violence did not.
There was a lot of speculation about riots and all that stuff, and, you know, from my heart, I know we're better than that.
Ashton Forever couldn't stay away as people raised their voices to end anti-black racism.
My heart is warm. I'm so proud of everybody that showed up today. It's been very peaceful.
As demonstrators snaked through Toronto's downtown, critics flooded social media. Black Lives Matter tweeting even before it began they weren't behind the March for Change. Delson Aventis says he's an organizer.
We have stated many times that we're here for peace, and people who come to cause trouble with malice in their hearts, they do not stand with us, and we do not endorse them at all.
Anna Perez felt safe enough to bring her young kids.
Well, they're black children, they're part of history. This is a movement that, you know, they should be part of.
I felt bad for George Floyd, and the police shouldn't be doing that to black people.
This is a teachable moment for them, she says.
Like I said, his sign, you know, it says, let me raise my son in peace. And that's all we want. We want our kids to be able to come home to us, to be able to have futures.
For many, George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis brought them here, demanding an end to police brutality against black people. In Toronto, the death of Regis Kurczynski-Paquette while police were in her apartment demonstrated to many that Canada suffers with systemic racism against black people.
Take a knee! Take a knee!
Today, some shouted at Police Chief Mark Saunders while he met with demonstrators, asked to take a knee, and he did.
Mistakes have been made, but it's about what do we do from those mistakes? How do we improve as law enforcement?
The move was met with some skepticism.
All I can say is that a lot of the knees have not been sincere, and I really hope that Mark Saunders' knee it was taken in sincerity. I'd like to believe that it is.
Premier Ford applauded the chief.
And I have a great deal of respect for Mark Saunders, or I should say Chief Saunders, showing incredible leadership. I saw the picture, and man, that was impactful.
Marching even through a downpour that came later in the day, many empowered to think this demonstration felt different.
I think a lot of people are starting to really take it in. It's hitting home.
Many businesses remain boarded up, and this will continue throughout the weekend as further protests and demonstrations are expected Saturday and possibly on Sunday as well. The Eaton Centre as well making the unusual step to close throughout the entire weekend, and it's set to reopen on Monday. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Things continued into the evening, but on a bit of a smaller scale. Talia Ricci went to Nathan Phillips Square for a vigil tonight.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
Smaller numbers, but voices just as loud.
Don't surveil me.
Exactly. Right.
Don't silence me.
There you go.
It has got to stop.
Right now.
You know what?
After a day of peaceful protests, the day ended with a vigil in Nathan Phillips Square to honor lives lost.
It'd be better if we start to tell our stories, because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. Like, Black Lives Matter, but you got to hear why it matters.
This was a smaller scale event that was planned on Facebook. There's been a few of those, and some have resulted in a bit of confusion.
Posts on social media circulated advising people to stay away from today's events, warning things could get out of hand.
I saw a little bit of the same sort of postings on Instagram earlier, and then I was like, I don't exactly think that this is going to be a large portion of the crowd that shows up, and I feel like whoever shows up to do this isn't actually there for the correct reasons, in my opinion.
But the evening remained peaceful, as all the protests have in Toronto. The organizers of tonight's gathering saying there's power in small numbers too.
These are a whole new group of people learning what's going on. You know, we were just here for the peace, and that's I heard about that too, and I was scared at first, but I'm like, if I'm afraid to step up now, then when am I ever going to step up?
Attendees tonight hoping this momentum continues and provokes change.
We've always been taught to stay united, and bringing together black people is unity. Bringing together black people is power. All it is a united front, a united force.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Peel Police taking a step closer to equipping its officers with body cameras. The Peel Police Services Board is asking the chief to look into how feasible that might be. The board held an emergency meeting to discuss how the service can preserve public trust while also allowing officers to do their jobs. The board hopes to make a decision on the use of cameras by the end of the month. Well, the outrage over the death of George Floyd is bringing back painful memories for a family in Durham region. 3.5 years after the death of Suleiman Fakhari, his family is still without answers. The mentally ill Whitby man died behind bars. A witness telling CBC guards beat him in a cell and one guard kneeled on his neck. As Philip Lushanik tells us, his family says there needs to be accountability for what happened.
Seeing video of the last few minutes of George Floyd's life was just too much for the brother of Suleiman Fakhari.
Those are the last few minutes of my brother's life too, and so I was in tears and I couldn't take the trauma.
Fakhari died in December 2016 at a correctional center in Lindsay. It happened just after guards entered his jail cell. He was pepper sprayed, shackled by the arms and legs. He suffered dozens of injuries caused by blunt force trauma. Although his body was badly bruised, initially a coroner found Fakhari's cause of death as unascertained. Then a witness came forward to the CBC's Fifth Estate, someone who had been in a nearby cell that day.
They beat him to death. I don't know how else to describe it.
And he saw at least one guard while Suleiman was on the ground, shackled. Saw that guard place their knee on Suleiman's neck while he was face down on the ground, struggling to breathe. And then he saw Suleiman stop breathing.
The Ontario Provincial Police reopened the case, but it's been 3.5 years and still no answers. The family says without knowing who is responsible, incidents like this will keep happening.
This is not like a unique situation. Just like my brother's case is not a unique situation. Individuals that have had mental illness have been killed, by guards and certain law enforcement, yet the pursuit of accountability seems to be elusive.
But unlike George Floyd's death, there was no video of Suleiman Fakhari's last minutes, or widespread protests or calls for accountability, justice, and change. Calls which the family says should be echoed here.
Why are the individuals that were responsible for my brother's death are not held accountable? And there's many stories like Suleiman's.
The OPP says the investigation remains ongoing and there's no further information available to release at this time. The family has filed a $14 million lawsuit. Philip Lushanik, CBC News, Toronto.
You might soon be able to get a haircut in Toronto. The city is telling hair and nail salons, as well as some restaurants, to start planning how to reopen.
Now, these business owners are advised to begin preparing for reopening, including the ability to provide modified indoor and outdoor service at restaurants using the guidelines that Toronto Public Health is making available today.
Now, the mayor making it clear those businesses can't reopen just yet. They need to wait for provincial restrictions to lift. But the city wants owners to start preparing plans for enhanced cleaning and disinfecting and allowing for physical distancing. Tory says there are close to 8,000 restaurants in Toronto, along with more than 3,000 nail, hair salons, and tattoo parlors. They've all been shut down since mid-March. Well, new job numbers show Canada's labour market is getting stronger as provinces start reopening. Stats Canada reported that almost 290,000 jobs were added in May. The increase came after 3 million jobs were lost over March and April. The number of people working less than half their usual hours dropped by 292,000 last month, and more people started actively looking for work in May. That pushed the unemployment rate to 13.7%. It is the highest number since StatsCan began gathering comparable data 4 decades ago. The country recovered 10.6% of employment losses and absences related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's job numbers surprised economists who had been anticipating more losses. Well, today the federal government offered $14 billion to provinces to help restart their economies. But Premier Ford says when it comes to Ontario, that just isn't enough. Lorenda Redekop has that story.
$14 billion for all of Canada, it won't solve the problem.
Premier Doug Ford says today's pledge by the federal government doesn't come close to covering the extra COVID-19 expenses in this province.
In short, there's a massive need in Ontario, up to $23 billion.
He says that includes money for healthcare, childcare costs, and also money to municipalities.
We know that the provinces and territories are under a lot of pressure right now and are facing real financial challenges.
The Prime Minister says this aid is to ensure restarting the economy happens safely, with the money targeted for the next 6 to 8 months.
We're talking about making sure businesses have the PPE they need so that every Canadian is safe on the job, no matter where in the country they go back to work. We're talking about childcare, so that every parent knows there's a safe place for their kids.
Today, Doug Ford also brought up an old dispute, transfer payments, that Ontario pays more to the federal government than it receives.
$13 billion are going to the federal government, and all we're asking is our fair share of the federal transfers. So we just hope that this is just a start of a conversation.
The opposition at Queen's Park would like Ford and his government to do more.
I think people are genuinely losing patience. I think they're surprised that this premier continues to ask the Prime Minister to do his job for him. And I think that businesses in Ontario deserve a premier that's going to stand up for them.
She wants businesses protected from eviction if their landlord doesn't apply for the federal aid money. More businesses could soon be allowed to open again. The Premier says he'll make an announcement early next week about when stage 2 of reopening could happen. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
2 Toronto landlords are speaking out against how the province is handling evictions during this pandemic. The landlords are seniors and say the actions of their tenants are putting their safety at risk. Now, they've already been granted eviction orders, but as Farah Morali explains, the moratorium prevents sheriffs from enforcing those orders.
Every day, I fear for my mom.
This has been Josephine Diaz's family house for 25 years. These days, she says, it doesn't feel a lot like home.
I don't try to talk to him at all, like, because he starts screaming at us when you try to talk.
Diaz says they started having problems with their tenant when he moved in January. She claims he started smoking inside, causing problems for her father, who suffered from COPD.
His asthma was like really, really bad.
In April, Diaz says her husband began coughing after smelling smoke. They took him to the hospital that night. A few days later, he went back to hospital after feeling sick again. He died on April 25th. The family says he tested positive for COVID.
My mom is so devastated because she didn't even say her goodbye. She goes like, I didn't even manage to hold your dad's hand and say that I love you.
The family first served the eviction notice on April 6th. The LTB ruled in May the tenant was impairing the safety of the family by smoking around oxygen tanks and further impairing the safety of Diaz's husband because he was at risk of asthma attacks. The tenant was ordered to leave, but he's still there.
Hello?
Mary Denbraber is in a similar predicament. The 91-year-old can't walk and is trying to move into the ground floor of her home because of the stairs. The LTB granted an order for her downstairs tenant to leave by April, but
then came the virus and put a stop to everything.
The Ministry of Housing says the moratorium was brought in to make sure people can stay in their homes right now, to keep everyone healthy. But the lawyer for Diaz and Denbraber says the ministry needs to be wary of keeping it going.
There are many Diaz families out there where someone has suffered some sort of trauma because they couldn't remove a dangerous person from their property.
Landlords can appeal to lift the moratorium in divisional court, but you need a lawyer, which can be expensive. The Diaz family has filed an appeal.
So that we have our safety back, our peace back.
The hearing is set for next Friday. Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, we'll take a look at when farmers' markets might reopen and why growers are accusing the government of flip-flopping. Plus,
drier weather in store this weekend and lots in the way of sunshine. And then next week, more hot weather and humidity. Your full forecast after the break.
it's time to take a look at this weekend's weather forecast. Nick Cernkovich joins us tonight. So, Nick, this weekend's going to be a little bit cooler, but drier.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. That is the name of the story for the weekend, and then next week, we're actually back into the humid weather once again. All in all, though, a pretty good looking forecast for the next 5 days. Here's a look at the headlines. So tapering showers this evening. We saw some heavier rain earlier today. Any areas that are seeing it now are going to lose them by tomorrow, or by tonight, rather, later tonight. Weekend sunny skies, and then temperatures back up close to 30 degrees by the time we hit next week. We were close today. We hit highs of about 28, 29 degrees. It will get warmer into next week. This came with a humidex in the 30s. So that humid weather is pushing out, and that's all along a cold front. So what will happen here is as that cold front sweeps through tonight and by tomorrow morning, temperatures are going to be warm, or at least at seasonal, but what you're really going to notice tomorrow is the humidity will have left us. It's going to be drier weather for tomorrow. That comes with some pretty good sunshine right through Saturday, and in fact, if I take you through Sunday, same story. Sunshine across the board, temperatures at or maybe just slightly below seasonal, but it's still going to be a warm weekend on tap as we move through the next couple of days. Now, winds, they're going to pick up a little bit. Wind gusts through the evening tonight and then into tomorrow, gusting to about 40 kilometers per hour. It won't be until Sunday where the winds begin to taper off. But other than that, again, a beautiful weekend in store for us and, in fact, right across southern Ontario. Southwestern Ontario for tonight, temperatures at 16 degrees in Windsor. That's through the overnight. Just a few clouds, but those are clearing out for tomorrow. Highs of about 23 to 25 degrees in the forecast. Same story for the Golden Horseshoe. Temperatures tonight, pretty mild at about 16 degrees. Average temperatures at this time of year of about 10. And then into tomorrow, highs of about 23, 24 degrees. That's pretty close to the seasonal mark for this time of year. But again, one thing you're going to notice is that it feels a lot less humid than what it did today. So here's a look at your long-range forecast. The next 3 days, 24 degrees on Saturday, Sunday, 21 degrees. The overnight lows also getting a little bit cooler as well. So cooler evenings in store for us. That changes heading into next week, though. Mix of sun and cloud right across the board. Lots in the way of sunshine. Highs on Tuesday and Wednesday of 29, 28 degrees. These could touch that 30 mark. There's no doubt about it. But the humidex is coming back in with humidex values reading about 35 as we head into mid next week. So lots to look forward to. A sunny weekend and then a hot week in store for next week. Mike.
Oh, all right. Thanks a lot, Nick.
You bet.
Weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. Take advantage of special offers now. It's hard to stop a train.
Farmers markets are a major source of revenue for a number of Ontario farms, but the markets have been on hold because of COVID-19. Growers say the province and the city are flip-flopping about reopening them. As Ali Chasson tells us, some say that is putting their livelihood at risk.
So the first list of essential services that was announced by the province in March included the word markets. So we were very excited because we said, okay, this allows us to figure out how to operate. After that first announcement of the essential list, there was a second announcement in early April. And in that one, they removed the word markets. That what created was a situation where it's up to each municipality to interpret the rule of law.
And in Toronto?
They're looking them as special events. And special events are canceled, and therefore you can't run them.
The Dufferin Grove Farmers Market moved their operation online. People head to the park, pick up a box, and go. But that's not sustainable.
It's basically doing everything to order.
That's also not how growing season works.
You don't really know a lot of times if what you put on your web store is going to be really available in the numbers that you're guessing. And so there's always some kind of stress.
So Marina Kidrolo with the Toronto Food Policy Council has been working with the city and the province to establish a new framework to allow markets to reopen safely.
Most of the markets are outdoors at this time of the year. So we know now research is indicating that outdoors is much better than indoors in terms of contagion. You can adjust the layouts so you can have more distance between vendors.
Getting the green light from the province or the city doesn't take away all of the problems that have plagued the farming industry since the pandemic struck. For the farmers who rely on these types of markets,
And everybody is saying, why is it that you can go to a grocery store and you can handle any amount of produce that you want to, and all you see is like a few signs saying, keep your social distance? The biggest worry is they're going to make so many rules that people will still not go to farmers markets.
Until the decision is made, you can continue to support local farms by shopping online. A lot of them have pickup spots in and around the city. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, you can't find this at a farmer's market. Coming up, we will tell you where this blue lobster was found, a rare find for any fisherman. But this crew hit gold twice. We'll explain after the break. A group of New Brunswick fishermen are celebrating two remarkable finds. Gary Robichaud and his three sons were fishing Tuesday when a rare blue lobster turned up in a trap. Now, thrilled with the discovery, of course, the men took photos of the colorful crustacean and they got back to work. 15 minutes later, they made another great find, a calico-colored lobster in a trap. Now, just 1 in 2 or 3 million lobsters is blue, but just 1 in every 30 million is calico-colored. The men threw the calico lobster back into the water after taking pictures and then donated the blue one to the aquarium. Hopefully they bought some lottery tickets as well. That's our newscast for tonight. If you're a dog owner, you'll want to listen to Quirks and Quarks tomorrow. They're going to be talking about a research study trying to figure out if your average dog is like Lassie, meaning if you got in trouble or little Timmy fell down a well, could your average pet step up in a crisis or come to your rescue? Don't count on it. Most dogs tested lacked any problem-solving capacity. You can hear how the test worked tomorrow at noon on CBC Radio 1. Have a great weekend. Good night.